So in anticipation of No Life Forsaken, which is coming out very soon, I have reread The God Is Not Willing. So I remember the first time I read this, I felt that this one was very different. The world felt very different. Everything about it felt like such, I don't want to say a departure from the Malazan world, but it was definitely the Malazan world, but it felt different. And now, reading it this time, I feel like I understand it more. It is definitely still Malazan, but of course, big changes have come to the world. So this is a post-crippled god world. So the most notable change is this new magic system. So Akarium's, whatever he did in either Dust of Dreams or I think it was the crippled god, he created a whole new set of warrens. And these new warrens are sort of a different system, and one that I don't fully understand, and I don't think we're meant to fully understand. It's much like reading Gardens of the Moon, you don't fully understand the Warrens. But they involve these things called runts, which of course named after Mappo, which seem to be little coins, two-sided coins, and each side is a different metal, and each metal is somehow aspected to that new Warren. And these runts, these coins, they also sort of fill the purpose of the deck of dragons. So they're sort of deck of dragons, but also warrens themselves, or used to warrens, or represent warrens, or aspected to warrens. But I guess the deck of dragons is kind of as well. Anyways, this isn't, the video is not to go into all that. But so there's new warrens. One that comes to mind specifically is the blue iron, I think it's called, which is like a lightning warren, which we haven't had a lightning magic. We haven't had magical lightning before. So not just the new warrens, but there's also sort of a new pantheon. The pantheon's been really shook up after the end of the crippled god, naturally. Probably the biggest change is Hood's death, all the hounds. So characters no longer curse using the name of Hood. They predominantly use the name of Iskar Jarak, who we know as Whiskey Jack, who is now not the god of death. There is no god of death anymore. But he is the sort of the guardian of the gates of death, along with the army of the dead, who are, of course, the Ascended Bridge Burners. Now, Iskar Jarak and the Ascended Bridge Burners, it is sort of known in the world that this is who they are. Like, they once were these Malazan soldiers, and now they are Ascended. It's not, I don't know if it's super common knowledge, but a lot of people know. Another one of the sort of curses a lot is revolving around Coltane, the Wiccans, crows, feathers, everything revolving the chain of dogs. And interestingly, and I'm really excited because I believe No Life Forsaken is going to Seven Cities, the sort of, not capital, I guess the imperial capital of the Seven Cities continent is Arin, which the sort of Coltane's fall took place outside of Arin, outside of the gates. But because of the importance of that event, Arin is no longer called Arin, it's referred to as Arin outside the fall. So Coltane's fall, which I would describe as someone who read Deadhouse Gates, it happened outside of the gates of Arin. In the world now, they see that fall as the predominant, most significant, important thing or place. And so Arin, the city, is outside of that fall. It's not the fall outside the city, it's Arin outside the fall. So I think it's a really cool cultural change. And I'm really excited to see what happens in No Life Forsaken. Speaking of No Life Forsaken, I've never done this before with any of the other Malazan books, but I'm going to go into it not looking at the Dramatis Personae. I'm going to try and go into it blind, because I'm sure there will be at least a handful of characters that we know from other novels, and I think going into it not knowing that these characters are in it will, I don't know, I'm just excited to see what happens. And I say that because in this book, it starts out talking about the last bridge burner serving in the Malazan army. And I think if you hadn't read the Dramatis Personae, you'd be like, who is this? Like, who is it? Like, Antsy? Is it Picker, Blend? Like, you're going through the list of all the bridge burners, like, who could it possibly be? Is it like Quickben or Clam or even Fiddler? But of course, if you read the Dramatis Personae, you know it's Spindle. And Spindle's a strange one. I haven't read the other books with Spindle in them recently enough, but to my mind, the Spindle in this book is a bit different than the Spindle in the other books. For whatever reason, I have this image of Spindle as being a very goofy character in the other books. He had his hair shirt, his warren that he would never want to use, always made animals go crazy, and so he was always like on edge about using it, which he still has his hair shirt, he still has his weird animal-related warren magic, but he feels like, I guess he's a much older man. This is 10 years post-Crippled God, so he's like an old veteran. But he feels like the sort of the stoic, the hard, very like kind of tropey, stereotypical in the Malazan world, that like grizzled old veteran. But aside from him, there are so many wonderful characters that are totally fresh and totally new and so different from anything else we've seen in the Malazan world, which is really impressive considering the amount of characters we have had. Ones that come straight to mind, of course, we have to start with Stillwater. She is something else. So I don't know if I should call her a sociopath or a psychopath. Like those words have very negative connotations, and there is one reference to her. It seems like she killed an innocent man just to get his apartment because he had a better view. To me, that means she's a horrible murderer. But aside from that, she has no sense of fear. She literally does not fear that whatever biological process that our fight or flight response, she does not have that. She fights hounds of shadow and warlocks within the tombs of Taistadur, and she does all these things, and just like she jumps off a wall into a horde of demons, and no fear at all. She's very straightforward. She doesn't really understand sarcasm, although at times she is sarcastic. She doesn't understand humor. Her inner dialogue, or I guess inner monologue, is so interesting, seeing the world through her eyes. She's an assassin. She's she's an assassin, but she's also secretly a mage. But everybody knows she's a mage, but she thinks it's secret and tries to keep it secret. And she thinks she's a brilliant genius because she's come up with this idea. Well, wait a minute. We have mages, we have assassins. What if someone was both a mage and an assassin? I could be a mage assassin. Like, what a great idea. I'll be so powerful. And of course, like, there are many other mage assassins. The entire claw was formed on the basis of mage assassins. And this is revealed to her at some point. And she's like, oh, they stole that idea from me. Even though it was invented way before me, it was still stolen. And yeah, she's very unique. She's a follower of the rope. She has a rope tattoo around her neck. She also has this scarf around her neck that was the shroud, this like funeral shroud of a witch that she stole from a barrow, because her like whole thing is she loves stealing from barrows. And so this witch also like helps her out, but also kind of like hates her for robbing the tomb. And look, I could talk forever about Stillwater. She literally fights with a Hound of Shadow and then sort of befriends it at the end of the book. Anyways, very, very unique character. Another one is Captain Gruff. So we sort of know how officers are viewed in the Malazan military. Like, I'm thinking of bridge burners in Gardens of the Moon, where they're going through captains. They're just killing captains after captains because they're all sort of incompetent. They only have their positions because of nepotism or birth or aristocracy or whatnot. So we're introduced to this guy Gruff, who is, I mean, his name's Gruff, so of course he's the complete opposite of the word gruff. He's a very fancy boy. He paints his nails, he does his makeup, he has to have everything really perfect and nice and neat. And he refers to his soldiers as sweetness or darling. And so I don't know what sort of an impression that makes on you, but I'm thinking like, oh, here we go. Like, who's this dandy? Like, he's gonna get a knife in the back for messing everything up. But it turns out he's like extremely competent. Like, he is an excellent commander, and he knows exactly what to do, and he cares for his troops. And yeah, it just a very, very unexpected character. So Captain Gruff, he's leading this I'm not sure the word, battalion of Marines, which are part of legions. So they're no longer armies, they're called legions now. So these are part of the 14th Legion, which I believe is an all-Marine legion. So there have been some changes in the Malazan military. So there's some epigraphs that seem to hint that the Malazan armies are sort of decreasing in effectiveness, specifically the regular infantry. However, the Marines are becoming much, much more deadly and much, much more effective. And throughout this book, we're meeting these squad mates, these Malazan Marines, and we're detecting that some are mages and some are sort of assassins. But as the book goes on, it's sort of revealed that they're all mages, which at first, when I first read the book, I thought, okay, we're just making the Malazan Marines the most overpowered, the like ridiculously effective killers. Like, it's like, what's their weakness? But on the second read, I sort of understand that they are that way because they've been chosen as the elite of the elite. And so to become a Marine, you sort of have to have a warren and access to a warren. And most importantly, and one of the huge themes of this book is you have to care. You're not just in it for money. You're not just in it because you need to let off some aggression and you want to kill some people. To be a Malazan Marine, you have to want to help people. You have to want to serve people. Which, yeah, speaking of the before I get off topic and start talking about themes, so the Malazan Marines in this, they're all mages. They all are very self-sacrificing and will do anything they can to sort of protect and serve. They're the ultimate sort of perfect soldier. They're not warriors, although they are extremely deadly. They're builders, they're engineers, they're humanitarian workers. They are everything a soldier should be. Which I know, saying that, it's like we were never what men could be. We were only what we were, is I think that the final epigraph of the Book of the Fallen. But these Malazan Marines are very different. And it seems like they're almost Mary Sue levels of perfect, but that could just be because they're meant to be the very best of the best. Another one, for example, is this guy Benger. So Benger has access to the Makra, but also high denouement, so he's sort of an illusionist, but also a healer. He completes a very complicated ritual, which we'll talk about, and it's so complicated and requires so much power that two of the other squad mates start making references to the fact that, hey, the Empire no longer has high mages. So the Malazan Empire, which used to have high mages, the very most powerful sorcerers who held military or political positions of power. Now, of course, having an individual who is individually, innately super powerful and giving them positions of political or military power, that's sort of a recipe for disaster. So Malazan Empire has no high mages. But of course, that implies that there's still going to be people who have the innate power to be a high mage. So where are those people? Well, they're just in with the Marines. They're just another mage in the army. So there are some mages out there who are intensely powerful, much like Quickben in the Book of the Fallen, who should have been a high mage and kind of became a high mage, but he was just a squad mage for a time. So that's Benger. He should be a high mage, but because of the political situation, he's just a mage. And at one point, he gets a bunch of otateral dust in the face and inhales a bunch of it, so that sort of shuts his magic off. And when the assassins come for him after throwing that, they think, haha, we got him. And he pulls out his sword and shield and just destroys the guy, because he's a mage, but he's also a Malazan Marine. He is deadly with a sword. So kind of reminded me of someone like Blues in the Crimson Guard, where super powerful mage, but also like a weapons master. Which again, maybe this is like just piling bonuses on top of bonuses, and there's not really any drawbacks. But so I think those are the huge changes to the world. So talk about themes of the book. So one of the themes is sort of the use of the military, or the reason for the military's existence. What is a military and what do they do? Are they just a killing machine used by the rulers of the nation to expand borders or to crush revolts? Or are they, like in this book, peacekeepers, humanitarian workers? Like I said, they build, they're engineers, they construct dwellings, they construct roads, they do kill, but only in order to protect the citizenry. And I don't want to get to the very end of this plot, but the very end of this book is just the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate selflessness of giving one's life for the life of one's enemy. Only Erikson could write something like that. And the other themes in this book are climate change, I would say. So environmental concerns and how people don't really pay attention to it until it's too late. There's a brief reference to it's very funny, about how scholars and scientists are ignored in the Malazan world, and if they hadn't been ignored, if their treatises, their sort of theses and articles in scientific journals describing how the climate is changing and the effects of that, if they had been paid attention to, then sort of some of these calamities could have been mitigated. And then the final one is, of course, civilization and slavery, and how sort of as being a member of a civilization, you're sort of a slave to it, slave to feelings and emotions such as vengeance, which is this whole sort of Karsa Orlong thing. That's his whole thing, is he wants to destroy civilization. So we do sort of tackle that what is civilization, what is the good of it, and it's sort of civilization versus nature, and how civilization will always try to destroy nature and think it's call it progress, but is it really progress, and what are we really gaining from it? But it doesn't go into sort of the romance of the noble barbarian or the noble savage. It also depicts how there is sort of a need for a just, and maybe not a need, but it does sort of lament that things change, but we can't really stop them from changing. Things advance, and once things have advanced to a certain point, we can't go back. We have to try and sort of exist in this new world. So the plot, let's get into the plot. Reading it the second time, especially after I just finished a sale, I made this connection that I had not made before. So a sale ends the Ian C. Esselmont novel, and God is Not Willing is chronologically the next book in the Malazan world. And it takes place some 10 years after the fact. But did I have this backwards? The plot of this would not have happened without the events of a sale, which sounds kind of crazy. But at the end of a sale, there was another peace made. The 4 founding races, well, 3 plus 1, founding races got together and decided to end the Jagat-Talanamas war. And in doing so, the Jagat then sort of started to break down and halt their Omtos Flak rituals, their sort of giant walls of ice that they had created all over the world to sort of keep the Talanamas at bay. If there's a peace, they no longer need these walls, so the ice is failing and cracking. Why does that matter in this book? Well, it turns out that the Jagat, because they're like crazy, weird, immortal scientist beings, had created a refuge, this sort of part of a continent. I don't know the scale of it, but the part of northern Genebacus they have blocked off with walls of ice, blocked off from the sea. And inside that, things have existed and lived for millennia. We have living, breathing, blood and bone Imas, which, how does that work with the ritual of Talan and Silver Fox being the first Talanamas born or the first bone caster born of flesh and blood when these bone casters have been existing up there? Doesn't matter. So there's Imas up there. There's also Jek. So the Jek are these diverse people. They turn into wolves. Packs of wolves are one individual. We've seen them here and there before on sort of tundras and icy areas. And just outside of this refuge, we have the Teblor, so the people of Karsa Orlong, the Tolblakai. And like I said, the whole plot of this book is these ice walls are failing, and so there is a massive flood coming. So this is sort of the climate change thing. So this wall of ice is going to break, and it's going to inundate the entire northern part of Genebacus, wiping out and killing everyone and everything. So as the ice wall's falling, these Imas are flooding down south, and the Jek are also flooding down south, and then they're picking up the Teblor, and everyone is mass migration / invasion heading south. So the Teblor are led by this guy, Elaid Tharos, who he's set up to sort of be maybe a foil to Karsa Orlong or some sort of stand-in for Karsa Orlong. He is this young Teblor warrior who, for the first time ever, manages to unite all the Teblor tribes, because he lets them know, hey, this flood is coming, we need to leave. If we don't, the Teblor are going to be wiped out. So he manages to create this massive, massive army. All the Teblor tribes, also the Jek and the Imas, who are like natural enemies, plus a whole bunch of tribal humans in these northern forests. And he's taking them all, and they're going to invade the south, which is Malazan Empire. They're going to invade the Malazan Empire and utterly crush them. They're staying all the way to Darujistan, which is where Karsa Orlong is staying. So Karsa Orlong doesn't make an appearance in this book, but of course he's referenced many, many times. He is known as the god of the shattered face. So he is sort of ascended to godhood. He is the god of the Teblor, I guess, although he is not willing. He, for whatever reason, is unwilling to sort of take his place as their god. And it's sort of hinted at why is he not willing? Well, it's because the Teblor are still sort of slaves, and until they free themselves of sort of traditions of violence and vengeance and these invisible chains that hold them back and that sort of tie them to a sort of a civilization, until they can recognize and free themselves from that, then the god is not willing. Karsa is going to continue to sit in Darujistan and wait. Anyways, so they're going to go down there to Darujistan, and it feels like Elaid Tharos, there's going to be some reckoning with him and Karsa, and he's some sort of confrontation. And so this is all set up, but very much like Erikson, he totally subverts your expectations and destroys any sort of tropes or any preconceived ideas you would have of what's going to happen, because this whole army of Teblor and Jek and Imas and everything, they don't quite make it. They get halted by the Malazan Marines, who are incredibly deadly. They're like I said, they're all mages. It's not even a war. It's very much not quite First World War, but like maybe one of the wars before that, with like Britain against African tribes, where like we have the Gatling gun and they do not. The Malazan Marines have magic, but they also have munitions. So that's another thing. Throughout this whole book, they're like, well, we don't have Morant munitions anymore. I guess the last of them were carted off by Cartharin Crust to assail, and relations with the Morant are not the same as they had been, so they're not getting Morant munitions anymore. But they do have this sort of these Malazan munitions, so they've tried to craft their own munitions, which I don't know if that's related to Hedge's attempts in The Crippled God when he was sort of working with another alchemist to try and come up with different munitions, or if the Malazans on their own came up with their own munitions. But these munitions are sort of described as being way less effective, very unreliable. They don't have as much of them, so they got munitions, but they're not really great. And then by the end of the book, we find out, no, these munitions that they do have are just as effective, if not deadlier, than any of the other ones that they've ever had. And it was all sort of an intelligence scheme where they sort of spread the word that these munitions are crap, and then when they actually work, it's a great surprise. So Fiddler and Hedge had created the drum, this sort of a minefield system, and they've improved upon it, and so they have mines. So they've mined this entire stretch of forest, and these Teblor run into the mines and explode, and then the Malazans think, okay, after the first wave, they'll realize, but no, they just keep coming, and they keep coming, and it's just a slaughter. And like I said, it's very one-sided warfare, and they talk about sort of arms races and how technological advancements in military weaponry and stuff, how things get deadlier and deadlier, and how the Malazan Marines with their munitions and their magic are just the peak of this sort of evolutionary deadliness. Yeah, so Alade Theros, I guess he dies. We don't really hear much for him, but his whole sort of thing just crumples in the face of the Malazan Marines, but also because the wall of water, this flood approaches and starts to just wipe them out, and they just sort of break for it, start running, and this is when we see the Malazan Marines at their best. So after this sort of slaughter, which they didn't want to do, but they're trying to protect their citizens in the Empire from this invading force, once they realize that these people are broken, they're no longer combatants, they are just charging at them to try and get away from this wall of water that's approaching, then the Malazans immediately switch, stop seeing these people as enemies and start seeing them as refugees. And so in this just heart-wrenching scenes, we have Malazan Marines running through minefields, blowing themselves up, trying to get to the Teblor and tell them, hey, get behind us, we're going to create a magical wall and try to protect all of you. But of course there's language barriers, and like I said, the minefield, and some of the Teblor are still trying to kill them. So it is pandemonium, but the Malazan Marines are doing everything they can to save these people that were once their enemies. And we have these scenes of the Malazans, one trying to sort of create a barrier to protect the Teblor behind him, and he's not powerful enough. He's struggling, and his armor burns off, and his clothing all burns off, and then his skin starts burning, and he gives everything. Like, people seem to love Beak in Reaper's Gale. This is Beak magnified 100-fold. Like, he's not just protecting his friends, he's protecting his enemies. It's just so selfless, to the point where the first time I read it, I'm like, this is unrealistic. Like, even the bridge burners that like were held in such high regard, it's said time and again that the bridge burners, like, some of them were just awful people. The Malazan Marines at this point in the Empire, I guess, are not just the best of the best in terms of skill, but they are the ones that care. There's one of the epigraphs, see if I can find it. So here it is. The epigraph for chapter 20 is, do you give a shit? That's the first question asked of a potential Marine recruit. So these are the best of the best in terms of just people. These are the best people. And so there's another scene where a handful of Marines have managed to, using their powers combined, they've managed to create this dome to sort of keep them from this water, which is they're like under 30 feet of water or something at this point, with this mass of huddled Teblor in the middle. and they're trying to hold it back, but they can't quite hold it back, and so they sort of decide amongst themselves and split the group into two, split the Marines into two, and half the group continues to try and hold back for as long as they can, expending their entire life force to hold this thing back, while the other half of the Marines will run in, grab as many of the Templar as they can, and take them into a warren to safety. And so they do that, but of course the other Marines are left to die. And it's such like, because you're building up to like, oh, here comes this epic battle, and the battle turns into a slaughter, which then turns into an environmental humanitarian disaster, and it's just totally unexpected, and it's so different from anything else in the Malazan world, but just incredible. And the part that it brought a tear to my eye the first time, and reading it again, it's just it made me cry, was when, like, throughout this, all the squads, the Marines that we've been reading about, and we're getting to know these new Marines, and of course we're loving these new Marines. They all get separated during this. So Stillwater and Bangor and a couple of the others managed to take a group of refugees into a warren, into Emerland, into the Shadow Realm, where they have to fight where Stillwater has to fight / play fetch with Pallid, one of the Hounds of Shadow. And the rest of the squad manages to get on barges. There's some barges on a river, and they manage to get a lot of the Marines and a lot of the refugees, crucially, onto these barges and survive. And so they sort of think that, half their squad is unaccounted for, so they're dead, but they're actually in this warren. And then there's Spindle and Ohms, his corporal, who's went to treat with his mercenary company in the Jek, and are sort of offering them supplies and food and everything, because the Jek are part of this army, but they're also not really part of this army. They're heading south, not for an invasion and not for like a reckoning with Karsa, but solely for survival. And the Jek have hired this mercenary company who, I'm not going to get into it, but it's felt like they were enemies, but then they were on the Malazan side, but they weren't really, and it turns out it was a whole thing. But anyway, so Spindle and Ohms are up north treating with them, so everyone assumes they're dead because they were like far up north. But of course, Spindle manages to use his warren to get the horses to run so fast that the horses literally tear themselves to pieces, and it breaks Spindle's heart because he hadn't used his warren in years and years and years, but he had to save himself and Ohms, to get the message across that the Empire is going to help out these Jek refugees and grant them land in the Malazan Empire, which is more than the Jek had ever hoped for. They assumed they would be hunted as wolves and slowly die off, but the fact that the Malazan Empire is like, hey, these lands are sparsely populated, you want in, come on in, we'll help you out. Erikson has somehow written the Malazan Empire to be everything that an empire should be. I know I'm all over the place, but anyways, the very emotional part is when they're all these disparate groups are at sort of the waters have sort of settled, this range of hills, which is now sort of an island or a ridge. The Marines that have remained and the refugees are sort of building up a camp and trying to sort of move on after the events. And that's when Stillwater pops out of the warren with the rest of the squad and some more refugees, and some of the other ones who assumed that they were dead sort of look up and see her, and one says, "Oh, is it Stillwater? Oh man, I'll get the sergeant. I gotta tell him." And then he punches another one of the heavies in the shoulder and he says, "Squad's back," and the other heavies just sort of staring off at them like, "Squad's back." It's such a powerful moment. Just that those two words, "Squad's back," and like Ohms and Spindle walk down and meet with them too. And even Gruff is just like, well, of course Gruff's emotional about it, but just like, squad's back. They go through hell. They sacrifice themselves for their enemies, and just because of chance, all the Marines that we sort of got to know, those three squads, they all survived somehow. And Spindle at the end, he sort of makes reference to, so he's talking to this woman, Bliss Raleigh, who's a master sergeant, who I don't think we've met before, but she's a veteran like him. I'm not sure of what campaigns or whatnot, but they have a sort of a romantic relationship, which I think is a pretty good one. Like, Erikson gets a lot of flack for writing poor romance, but I think the Spindle Bliss Raleigh is very nice. And Spindle mentions that, hey, I hear there's a few bridge burners down in Darujistan, so pick her Ansi and blend. I think it's only those three left, and he's thinking of sort of retiring down there, and Bliss Raleigh wants to join him, sort of thing. So that could happen in the future. There's also interesting, so like I said, the Malazan Empire seems like a very helpful, healthy, great place, and part of that's because of the rulership of Emperor Mallick Rel, which, like, it's hard for me, having read Deadhouse Gates and also Forge of the High Mage, to hear anything good about Mallick Rel, but in this one, Spindle says, like, you know what? You know, it was a rough start, but Mallick Rel, he's a smart guy, and he managed to lock things down, and things are going good, so, you know, I got nothing against Mallick Rel. Although there is a part at the end where Ohms is sort of having this internal monologue where he's talking about how, yeah, sure, the Empire's great and all, and Mallick Rel's doing a good job, but power corrupts, and, you know, if things get out of hand, I guess I might have to do something about that. And he sort of feels for something dangling from a necklace that is not there. And it's been sort of hinted through this whole book, or everyone sort of assumes that Ohms used to be Claw. He's ex-Claw. He's like, I'm not Claw, I was never Claw, but if I was, sort of thing. So it's like, is he Claw, is he not Claw? Is he a mage, is he not a mage? I don't think he actually was a mage or a Claw, because at this point, when he's like feeling for that thing, oh, is it a Claw necklace? No, he says something like, the Claw don't deal with internal affairs. Which means, well, who does deal with internal affairs? Well, the Talon, this sort of dancers group that supposedly was eradicated, but then we find out that Tavor was part of the Talon, and so they still exist. And so I guess Ohms was a Talon, and Mallick Rel needs eliminating. The Talon are there to do it. So I thought that was a really cool little Easter egg at the end. So there's only one other storyline that I haven't talked at all about, and that is one related to this character Rant, who takes the last name Blood Curse. So Rant is a tragic story. So he's a teenager, but he is Teblor, or half Teblor. His father is Karsa Orlong. His mother is this woman Sarlis, who was raped by Karsa during what is known as the Idiot Raid in House of Chains, when Karsa and his two buddies charged down to Silver Lake in a raid and got caught, and they all got killed, and Karsa got incarcerated. And then escaped slavery later. But during this raid, he raped many people. So he raped some of the Teblor, so the Rathid Teblor that he marched into, and it's sort of explained in this that it's not like rape is okay, but it explains that in the Teblor culture, when you conquer another people, the husbands or wives of the warriors that you kill are sort of yours to do with as you please. You can either kill them, or they can consent to having sex, which consent to being raped, I guess, which the word consent there really doesn't make sense. But that's why Karsa raped those women that he did, those Teblor women, and his two daughters that were born of that we do meet in Toll the Hounds, and also play a part in this novel as well. But not just the Teblor. When he got down to Silver Lake, the sort of town, he raped a human woman, and Rant is the offspring of that union. The union in the physical sense. But because Karsa had been he had imbibed this blood oil while on this raid. So this sort of blood oil, it's like a sort of a berserker potion that induces you in an intense rage and gives you super strength, but it also contains otadral dust, so it gives you sort of a magic deadening aura, and it's also, I guess, kind of an aphrodisiac in like a crazy rage rape way. Because he raped the woman while imbibing this blood oil, he sort of infected her with it, and because she's not Teblor, she's not Tolbolkai, she's human, it persisted, it stuck with her. And so her whole life after this point, she has had uncontrollable urges, sexual urges, and so she sort of becomes a prostitute, and sort of everyone in town wants a taste of the blood oil woman. And of course she hates herself because of this, but she loves her son Rant, and so she does it because she needs to make money. She can't leave the house because like she's part insane from this blood oil. And the start of this book, Rant he's hit puberty, and so his mother sees Karsa in him, or sees him as Karsa for one night, and so she rapes him. And she's sort of beating herself physically, and her face, and she's bloody and bruised because she does not want this to happen, but she can't control it. And it's heartbreaking. Like, Erikson's really good at writing heartbreaking moments, but the abuse of a child by his own mother, who does not want this to happen. And so when it's over, she tells him, leave, like, get out. And he thinks he did something wrong. He's really upset that he doesn't have anything to pay her with, because he sees men come and do this with her, and then they pay her, and he's He's really upset that he can't pay her. And she's like so distraught. She's like, if you don't leave, I will kill myself. And I mean, she would, because she would never ever want to do that again. And so Rant flees and begins his own sort of hero's journey, where he meets Damask, this hunter who he was like a scout for slavers and a hunter that killed and wiped out a lot of wildlife, and he, in his old age, he's sort of seen all the wrong that he's done, and he has repented, but he still gets punished for it with a brutal death at the end of this. So he sort of attaches himself to Rant and tries to help this kid out. They encounter these two Jek, one of the lords of the Jek, who also sort of swear themselves to Rant after Rant like beats them up and almost like kills a whole bunch of the wolves, but they're diverse, so he doesn't kill all of them. And so Rant sort of he's building this sort of this posse, these people that can't help but follow him. He sort of has the same aura that his father does, in that people will just gather to him. He also gets like, he has this magic, well, he has this knife that a Malazan had given him, iron steel, and when he's in one of the fights with the Jek, he stabs the Jek wolf through the head, and the knife stabs into the ground, and that was sort of a special magical ground where spirits and souls were stored. And the soul of a Shigal assassin, so a Chimal Shigal assassin, goes into the blade and it sort of helps Rant out, and is sort of Rant now has this demon possessed blade that's like super deadly. It's just a knife, not a sword. Anyways, he meets the Teblor. He meets his half sisters there, who upon finding out who he is, one of them sort of pledges her sword to him. And there is sort of a confrontation between him and this Alade Theros, this guy who's sort of in opposition to Karsa, but he manages to get away, and eventually he manages to save the people that he's with from this flood through the help of this goddess of the Jek. So the Jek worship this goddess Warbitch, which is a really cool name for a goddess. Especially a goddess of the Jek, like wolves. She is the daughter of Tog and Fandaray, the wolves of winter, the wolves of war, and she sort of is the one sending the Jek south, not to fight, even though she is the daughter of war gods, but just in order to survive. And she sees something in Rant, and she's like, stick with Rant and you guys will survive. And so they do. They manage to survive. And then we have sort of a very weird time loop thing, which we don't really get in Malazan, but it was really cool. So the floodwaters come, but when they come to where Rant and the Jek are, and the couple Teblor and people that are with him, it's not a great tsunami. It's sort of a gentle, not gentle, but it's gentle enough that they can get to high ground and escape it. And they're sort of questioning why it wasn't as bad as it was, and they think, well, maybe it was the forest that sort of slowed it down. But one night, the Shigal assassin in Rant's blade, which calls herself 3, says like, hey Rant, I'm gonna have to show you something. So she sort of not astrally projects, but she separates his soul from his body, and he flies up into the air and he sees the great new sea, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna reverse time now, because apparently that's a thing she can do. So they reverse time all the way up till the ice wall has broken. She's like, something doesn't make sense here. So the ice wall broke, but it didn't wipe out you guys, so why didn't it wipe you guys out? And Warbitch is there, and she's trying to use all her power to hold back the wave to protect the Jek, but she's not powerful enough. The Jek, they're too few in number, there's not enough worshippers. Remember in the Malazan world, worshippers give their power to their god, but then the god also has an obligation to the worshippers because of that. But there's not enough worshippers, so she doesn't have enough power. And then Rant shows up. Again, this is like a weird time loop because it's back in time. So Rant's spirit shows up and grants her the power of innocence and anger. I can't really explain this, but he sort of is held within him and has picked up along the way all of the innocence that was left behind by children when they grow up. It's something that they discard or they leave behind without even really knowing it. That empowers Warbitch and enables her to sort of hold back the wave, so Rant and his people are then able to escape. Like I said, there's a bit of a time paradox there, but who cares? So Warbitch had anticipated dying during this, but she doesn't. And then she manages to meet up with the rest of the Jek and explain to them, like, hey, it was Rant that did this. So yeah, I think that's just about covers the whole darn thing. Like I said, the first read through, I was like, I don't know, it's different, but the second read is just, wow. I mean, there's lots I left out, like this lovely red-headed lady on the cover. Yeah, what an incredible book. Just the very best of humanity and just unexpected disasters. The book sets it up like it's going in one direction, and then it totally twists it on its head and it makes it, I would say, an even more incredible story. But anyways, that's enough of that. That is The God Is Not Willing, first tale of Witness. This new and currently coming out series by Stephen Erikson. So I look forward to No Life Forsaken, book 2, which is coming out very, very soon.